Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you would unmute your microphone, and you are live.
Thank you, Mr. CO. Just want to refresh everyone that this meeting, as I call it to order, is constituted under the ministerial order number M139, which has replaced M083 as of May 1st. I'll refrain from reading the 8 pages of this order, but essentially it is the same and more conclusive or inclusive, let me put it that way, and our corporate officer will assure that it's in the minutes of this meeting. So I'll call the regular council meeting of May 4th to order. Item 2.1, public input. Due to the format of this meeting and the 60-second time delay on broadcast, council is unable to accept real-time public input as part of this live meeting. However, the Q&A function of the electronic meetings have been activated, and we have up to 5 statements or questions may be submitted to be addressed later in this meeting. Only questions or statements received by the time council reach the end of the agenda will be considered, which will be approximately 1 to 3 minutes before it's viewable by the public. Questions or statements will be reviewed by staff for the appropriateness and subject matter. Okay, item 3, I need a resolution that the May 4th, 2020 regular council meeting agenda be adopted. Who will so move? Seconded.
Councillor Howe.
I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you. Are there any delegations?
No, there are no delegations, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. There being no delegations and no public and statutory hearings, I'll now move on to 6.1, adoption of council meeting minutes. I need someone. Staff recommends that the April 2020 regular council meeting minutes be adopted as present. Who so moves?
Councillor Howe.
Seconded.
Councillor Weed.
I'll call the question. Those in favor?
Motion carries.
I see someone wants something to discuss. Before I call the question, I'll back it up. Any comments or questions?
Councillor Weed, please unmute your microphone. Go ahead.
I'm not sure if it was important or should be brought to attention, but the SLRD meeting that you've got me attending on the 20th, it was just a trial Zoom setup meeting.
We will make that change.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if you could please unmute your microphone. And go ahead.
Any other questions or concerns, corrections, additions? There being none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you. There being no business arising from the minutes and no rise in report, we'll move to item number 9 regarding the correspondence. Does anyone, councillor, want to remove an item of correspondence for discussion under new business? There being none, I'll ask. Staff recommends that the correspondence included in the staff report dated April 30th, be received for information. Who would so move?
Councillor Hoffel.
And seconded.
Councillor Howe.
Call the question. Those in favor?
Motion carries.
Thank you. Okay. Item 10, there being no reports from committees of council and commissions, we'll go to item 11, reports and presentations of staff. 11.1 is our statement of financial information. And as council recalls, in our last meeting, we had a presentation by our auditors and by our CFO. Staff recommends that the District of Lillooet Statement of Financial Information report. Oh, before I do that, does staff have any comments before we call on this resolution?
No comments from staff, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Okay. I seek a mover that the District of Lillooet's Statement of Financial Information Report for the year ended December 31st be approved, 2019 be approved for submission to the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and that the Mayor and Chief Financial Officer be authorized to sign the approval of financial information page. Who will so move?
Councillor Hoffel.
Who seconds?
Councillor Howe.
Any discussions? There be none.
Oh,
Yeah.
Councillor Howe. Councillor Howe, please unmute your microphone.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I have a question. Number 6 on page 60, under receivables. Just from my understanding, it shows that property tax went down for 2019, and I'm pretty sure I'm reading that correctly, and I'm just curious as to why, if that's possible to ascertain.
CFO, could you please unmute your microphone and go ahead?
Through the mayor, I don't have the exact details, but obviously more people paid their property tax by the end of the year than the previous year. There was also the tax sale last year. So because there was some properties that went at tax sale, they would no longer show as a receivable this year. So that would bring it down as well.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Councillor Howe?
Page 76, leased space at the rec center. It appears that most of these leases, their end dates are coming up this year. And so I'm just curious through the mayor if the district is in communications with the tenants to renew those leases.
Go ahead, CFO.
Through the mayor, they are typically those user leases are typically year to year. I believe Bain has been in contact with all of the user groups, but until we know how this situation unfolds, it's hard to say whether the leases themselves will be renewed at the normal time or whether that'll be delayed as well.
Councillor Howe, do you have another follow-up?
That's everything. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if you could unmute, please.
Okay, thank you. Any other councillors have any questions, comments? Thank you. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you, council. We'll go to item 11.2, Climate Action Review Incentive Program. Looking for someone to move that the 2019 Climate Action Revenue Incentive Program report be received for information.
Councillor Weed.
Okay, and second?
Councillor Howe.
Okay. Any comments, concerns?
There is something from the CFO, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead, CFO.
Through the mayor, thank you. I just wanted to be clear, there was some discussion last year during the CAREP reporting of bringing forward a report with the next, so this year's CAREP, of the options that were available to do with those funds. At this time, I did not put a report in with this. It's not that that we've forgotten about that. In my opinion, we're going to need those operating funds this year. Council can certainly direct if they so choose that those funds be set aside in a different reserve. But as for this year, I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend that they stay in our operating funds, which is how what would happen as things are right now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you could unmute and go ahead.
Thank you. Any further comments, questions from council? Thank you. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you, council. We move to item 11.3 before discussion from staff or tabling. I understand we have some public input opportunities. So, Mr. Corporate Officer, could you take it from here?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. The applicant was going to join the meeting. However, it appears that he was either unable to connect. He was just going to talk about his development, but I can take it from there. We also sent out letters to all the properties within a 100-meter radius of this property at 1777 Highway 12. And we received no feedback for or against the proposal. So development permit DVP 20-001 is to vary the provisions of the subdivision and development servicing bylaw in order to waive the requirement of having a 1.5 meter paved strip in lieu of a sidewalk, and to reduce the requirement of the ditch to more of a swale, which has also been supported by the Public Works Foreman and the interim capital project administrator. So the proposed development is for a subdivision along Highway 12. This is the road that would require a 1.5 meter asphalt strip. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do that in this case because it doesn't lead to a pedestrian access road. Highway 12 does not have a sufficient shoulder or walking path on it that would justify the additional cost to having this paved strip. In terms of the ditch, the subdivision servicing bylaw requires that the ditch be 1 meter deep at a 2-to-1 ratio with a 0.5 meter flat bottom ending in a sort of a trapezoidal shape. This is a little overkill for the climate of Lillooet. Most of the MMCD, which are the engineering standards of British Columbia, are skewed towards the coast, which is a little wetter than it is out here. So staff are supporting both of these requests to reduce the requirements of the subdivision development servicing bylaw. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Planner, and thank you to staff for giving this consideration and making things happen within our community. And thank you for the applicant for carrying on. I'm going to, no more comments from staff, then I'll ask to table this recommendation and then open it up for discussion.
I believe Councillor Wiebe had a question.
Go ahead.
If you can unmute your microphone, please, Councillor Wiebe. Go ahead.
Sorry. Another one of my downfalls, I'm directionally challenged. Is the frontage of this right on Highway 12?
Yes, I've switched the PowerPoint back on your screen there. Most of the frontage along the northern portion is directly along Highway 12, and then there is another strip of a lot to the south, and I believe I'm getting a call from the applicant. Just a moment. I'm on with them right now if you would like to address them. Okay. Mr. Mayor and Councillor Wiebe, are you amenable to the applicant making a statement at this time?
Oh, frozen.
Mr. Grosser, go ahead.
I was trying to log in and I can see everybody's faces, but for whatever reason I can't seem to log
At this point, if you would like to speak to your developments, you may go ahead.
Good afternoon or early evening to council. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or council. I'm sorry I tried to log in, but was obviously unsuccessful. I can see your view, but I can't log in. So the idea of putting a swale versus a large ditch was basically trying to make it look a bit more amenable and at the same time create a better, was trying to make it so that we could service that better, and I think it would look a whole lot better in terms of making it a reasonable, respectable looking subdivision.
Thank you, Mr. Grausler. Does anyone else from council have anything to add? Councillor Howe, if you would unmute your microphone, please. Go ahead.
I'm unclear as to what a swell is and how that differs from the amount allotted in the bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A swale versus a ditch. A ditch is generally a larger constructed and often engineered depression in order to channel stormwater runoff. A swale is very similar, just on a much, I guess, shallower scale. It's generally more of a depression to help funnel stormwater in a certain direction. It's often vegetated, and it's not as onerous to create. Councillor Howe, do you have a follow-up?
I do.
Go ahead.
Has a swale, has it been proven effective in other communities where the climate is similar to ours that we could reflect on?
Thank you, through the mayor. In my previous positions in the Okanagan, which I believe have similar climates to Lillooet, being a very arid part of the province, many of our stormwater catchments were swales instead of the full ditches. The ditch that is currently in the SDS bylaw is something that you would see in Richmond, which is a little wetter than it is here.
Mm-hmm. I have one further question, if you don't mind. Through the mayor, can staff inform council of any concerns or negative consequences of moving ahead with these recommendations, so we may weigh that into our decision?
Through the mayor, the only thing that I could foresee is if Highway 12 ever became a pedestrian mecca, then the district would have to construct the pedestrian access down the proposed road dedication. At this time, I believe that that's very unlikely that there's going to be any sort of pedestrian upgrades to Highway 12, and very unlikely that there's going to be any sort of transit stop at the top of this road dedication. In terms of the stormwater runoff, there's a small possibility that if it's inadequate, the district would have to upgrade it. However, the developer's engineer is still going to have to show the approving officer that the swale that they're going to be proposing to construct will still meet the requirements of the region for stormwater runoff.
Okay, thank you. That is all for my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, Councillor Hopful has a question.
Okay.
If you can unmute your microphone and go ahead.
Thank you, through the mayor. I was just wondering, with the depth of ditches and the fact that it is overkill for our area, can we avoid this with other future proposed subdivisions by amending what we have in our current OCP, I suppose?
Through the mayor, it would be an amendment to the subdivision development servicing bylaw, not the official community plan. Council can direct staff at any time to prepare an amendment to the bylaw, and it is, I believe, on the 2021 work plan to completely review the subdivision development servicing bylaw. So yes, is the short answer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, if I can add as well that obviously we know our OCP was up for renewal and it's going to be postponed a little bit, so it's a bit obsolete. And as staff has made us aware, council, that our subdivision bylaws are in need of rework. And I just appreciate that staff has given this accommodation and consideration, as well as the applicant, in terms of persistence in moving forward through this process, because council will have two important issues to deal with, which will take some time, and that is the new OCP and a completely rework of our subdivision bylaws. Does that make sense, Mr. Planner?
It does, yes, Mr. Mayor.
Any further questions or comments from council? I'll call the question. Oh, I have to read it and table it first. I need someone to move that the DVP 20-001 for the reduction of the requirements for a ditch prescribed in section 5.4.19 of the subdivision and development servicing bylaw number 286 from the required ditch to a swale, and to waive the requirement for a 1.5 meter walking path prescribed in section 6.9 table 1 to be approved. Who will so move?
Councillor Wiebe.
And second?
Councillor Hopfull.
Any further questions, comments? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Grosler. Thank you, staff. Thank you, council.
Thank you for your consideration.
Bye now,
Jennifer.
bye now, Mr. Grosler.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, we'll move to 11.4, Chamber of Commerce Economic Recovery and Growth Agreement. Would staff can explain that a little bit, please?
CAO, please unmute. Go ahead.
All right, thank you. So there's been some discussions between the district and some stakeholders such as Tourism Lillooet and of course the Chamber of Commerce about what we can do as a municipality and as a community to try to work together to get out of this economic downturn that COVID has created for us. And so from those very preliminary discussions, we thought that we could maybe sit down together 2 meters apart and explore ways to work formally together and perhaps look at ways to support their memberships. Right now, they're not fully representative of all the number of businesses that are actually licensed in town here. And for them to have the greatest impact and for the district to work through them the best, if the chamber could be strengthened through a relationship with the district, we see that as advantageous to the business community and to ultimately everyone in this community who depends upon our businesses to be healthy. So we're looking for direction to take that conversation to the next level, come up with some practical ideas and bring them back to council before making any commitments. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Any questions, comments from staff, from council? Okay. I need someone to move that staff be directed to work with the Lillooet and District Chamber of Commerce to explore an opportunity for a formal partnership, including a fee-for-service component to support economic recovery and growth in Lillooet in response to the financial impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Who will so move?
Councillor Wiebe.
And who seconds?
Councillor Howe.
No further comments. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you. We'll go to, I move to item 12, 12.1, tax rates bylaws. Staff wish to make a comment?
CFO, please unmute. Go ahead.
Thank you, through the mayor. So this tax rate bylaw is to set the tax rates for both our municipal property taxes, as well as the SLRD and the hospital district, who tell us how much money they want us to collect, and then we have to calculate the rates. So those have to be part of the bylaw as well. In addition, part of this bylaw is the to change the property tax due date for all classes from the typical July 2nd due date to September 30th, with penalties to be imposed on any unpaid 2020 property taxes as of October 1st. Penalties would be imposed.
Okay. Thank you. Questions from council? I have one. Is there a feeling that we have the cash flow capability to carry ourselves to that point if the majority of the residents elect to wait until the September?
Go ahead, CFO.
Through the mayor, it's almost an impossible question. We are optimistic, yes, that we will be in a positive cash flow situation still through to September 30th. There are a number of larger companies such as BC Hydro or the banks that pay property taxes on behalf of mortgage holders that may still pay on the regular due date because they're so used to having a July 2nd due date. So we're cautiously optimistic that there's going to be some of those larger corporations and, as I said, banks that do pay on the typical due date rather than waiting until the end. So at this time, yes, I'd like to say that we are optimistic that we're not going to have to use that revenue anticipation borrowing bylaw. But again, aside from keeping a close watch on it, you know, sort of day by day, week by week, I can't make any guarantees, but I'm optimistic.
Thank you, Ms. Leroux. That's understandable, and obviously we're with you in terms of monitoring our cash outflows through that period. I'm sure council will agree with me. The less we have to infringe on our borrowing, the better we like it. So it would mean that we will be very careful. And I think our last meeting where we had projects red circled and the like, we rely on staff to get us to that point. And if we're able to achieve that without going into borrowing, that's quite a feat, and appreciate the diligence of you, the staff, to get us there. Any other comments from council?
None indicated, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, I need someone to move that the first resolution, the tax rates and municipal tax collection bylaw number 2020-016 be introduced and read a first and second time. Who will so move?
Councillor Hoffman.
And second?
Councillor Howe.
I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you, council. Number 2, I need someone to move the tax rates and municipal tax collection bylaw number 2020-016 be read a third time. Who will so move?
Councillor Hoffman.
Seconded?
Councillor Howe.
Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you, council. And number 3, I need someone to move the tax rates and municipal tax collection bylaw number 2020-016 be adopted.
Councillor Hoffman.
And seconded?
Councillor Howe.
I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you, council. Okay, we'll move to 12.2, zoning bylaw amendment Z20-005, brewery, winery, and distiller in the industrial zone. Comments from staff, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Zoning file Z20-005 is the first one of a few zoning amendments I intend to bring forward to try and facilitate community economic growth, which is one of Council's strategic priority objectives. In this case, we are aware that there has been some interest of expanding some of these uses in town. And it came to my attention that the industrial zone didn't have any of these as principal permitted uses, which is a little unusual in many places. For instance, the city of Merritt and Pemberton both have breweries, wineries, and distilleries in their industrial zone. So in an effort to keep us competitive regionally, staff are bringing this forward as a pre-zoning to hopefully encourage some economic developments coming out of this this crisis we're finding ourselves in. Generally, best practice is to make sure that you have an application to drive these staff objectives. However, I have noticed that our development applications have dropped in the last month and a half, so it has opened up some time for staff to be able to review the bylaw and find out what might be being a little onerous in it and what we can do to help facilitate some of this growth. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Planner. Good idea, and thank you for bringing this forward. I need someone to move that zoning bylaw amendment bylaw number 2020-18 be introduced and read a first and second time. Who will so move?
Councillor Weed.
Second.
Councillor Howe.
Any comments, questions?
Not indicated.
Okay, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you, Council. Number 2, I need someone to move that pursuant to section 464 of the Local Government Act, the holding of a public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw number 2020-018 is hereby waived. And that pursuant to section 467 of the Local Government Act, staff give notice of the waiving of the public hearing for zoning amendment bylaw number 2020-18. Who will move?
Councillor Weed.
Seconded.
Councillor Howe.
Any questions or comments from council? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you, council. We have item 13.1, work in progress as of May 2020. Need someone to recommend that the work in progress, someone to move that the work in progress as of May 2020 be received for information. Who will so move?
Councillor Weed.
And seconded.
Councillor Howe.
Any comments from council? Thank you, staff. I recognize that obviously we council recognize that most of your energies are with COVID-19. I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Thank you, staff. Thank you, council. There being no notice of motion, we'll go to 15.1 Mayor's report. Just a few items. Number 1, I had a Zoom meeting on May the 30th with Statlium chiefs and administrators, both north and south, essentially addressing concerns brought forth by some of the local administration and chiefs regarding economic reopening of Lillooet businesses and the concern about the influx of out-of-towners or tourists through our particular area, both meaning the traditional territories and lands of the Statlium as well as the district of Lillooet. A lot of discussion, a lot of concern, and the CAO and I have one meeting left, I think, with a number of the chiefs, and we'll be able to come back and report to council in the sense of where we're going with it. I was pleased or buoyed by the fact that there was a concern by them that the local economy become available, or let's say more active, as soon as it's possible. But there is an extreme concern in terms of the out-of-town people inundating our town, and I think the Haida Gwaii have experienced that recently, and I think that's a concern that all of us have here. So you'll hear more from that after the CAO and I have had our next meeting, and that's essentially it for me.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Hopful, please unmute your microphone. Go ahead.
Hi. Okay, so other than our last virtual meeting, I've been, I've had a lot of conversations both by email and phone, just regarding with the Historical Society, just regarding and discussing tourism and what that might look like this summer. And really, I just maintain that at best it's just speculation and patience. So it's kind of where I'm sitting with that. And I reiterate, until we have a vaccine, I think that tourism in Lillooet is going to be just that, just a lot of speculation and patience. So with the COVID-19 testing, I think that it's out on Facebook and everybody's kind of aware that we are testing at the hospital now. So basically it is testing is by appointment only. It's drop-in appointments are not available, and people are just asked to call 250-256-1381 to be screened. And they just leave their name and their contact information, and a nurse will contact them within 24 hours to screen for testing. And basically what they're asking them is patients, if they have a fever or cough or overall feeling of discomfort, runny nose, extreme feeling of tiredness, sore throat, nausea, vomiting, and or diarrhea, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, and or chest pain. So again, that number is 250-256-1381. And if you have one of those things, then that's the criteria they're using to do these tests. And yeah, so you just leave your name on this message machine, and again, a nurse will contact you. And other than that, that's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Howe, please unmute your microphone and go ahead.
Okay. So actually, before I get into it, quick question to staff. Is it possible to post on our website the information that Councillor Hopful has just provided regarding the phone number for testing at the hospital?
CAO, please unmute your microphone. Go ahead.
Yes, I do believe we've posted something along those lines. I'll double check with the EOC and make sure that it contains all of that information.
Thank you. Okay, so fairly short and sweet. April 24th was the Chamber Board meeting. April 29th, Chamber Board meeting, Chamber of Commerce, that is, board meeting. And April 30th was the BC EDA conference call, and those are happening weekly. Some larger information coming out of the Chamber of Commerce board meeting is that they are now hiring for the executive director position, and that job posting will come out, they're hoping, by Wednesday. It's going to be posted to the Chamber of Commerce Facebook site, as well as posters around town. The position is $500 a month for 4 months. So that will be from May 18th to September 17th. If anybody is interested, please contact the Chamber of Commerce. And the role of that person will be well, flexible as far as I understand, but some of the focus will be on obviously membership growth, marketing, social media, and reporting. I spoke with Stefan of Tourism Lillooet today. He also had given a go-ahead to share that they are working again on their strategic plan. Not so much the creation of it, as that's been completed, but more focusing on developing further priorities from the initiatives that have come from the strategic plan. And so they've actually have a meeting tomorrow where they'll start really digging into that and developing implementation. So that's exciting information to have. And that is all for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wiebe, please unmute your microphone. Go ahead. There you
Okay,
go.
I guess it takes a double touch. I had a question for either our CAO or the mayor before I give my report. I did have my hand up earlier when the mayor was giving his report. If we're anticipating any kind of, well, seeing as we have a crew moving into the campground, I'm wondering if we're anticipating any kind of feedback from anybody or anything.
Mr. Mayor or CAO, would either of you like to address the question?
I could just say I was going to include that in my CAO report.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll wait until then. That's fine. I just, when the mayor had said about, you know, closing this off and closing that off and meeting with the chiefs, I was kind of, oh my goodness, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I will carry on. Thank you. April 21st, I met with Mayor Busse to get some feedback and information to go into my SLRD meeting. And on April 22nd, we did another virtual Zoom SLRD meeting. It was actually a meeting and it didn't go as well as the trial meeting. Not sure what we're going to do about that, but I just kept freezing and missing, and I ended up doing the last hour and a half to 2 hours with my telephone. On May 1st, I met with Lori Reimer, the district's branch writer, and when I say met with her, we kind of traded some information from vehicles in the mall parking lot. It kind of almost felt like something underhanded going down. I'm the lady in the red car with the blue binder, and she's the lady in the gray pickup. And yeah, so she is potentially working on a grant for the skateboard park. So I'm really looking forward to that. And other than that, I've basically been in hiding. Someone left me a lovely little plant on my step yesterday with a little note that they were promoting positivity in this time. And yeah, it really kind of made my day. So I think our community is pulling together and everything is moving along.
Thank you, Councillor Wiebe. Mr. Mayor, may I go to the CAO?
No, I neglected to address one of my other points between last meeting and this meeting. And thank you, councillors, for all your input and your support through this trying times, especially your staff as well. I had a very good discussion, most interesting, on May 1st with the Kamloops Mayor, Ken Christian, and he promised when the social distancing is taken care of, he's coming to Lillooet to have coffee, wine, or maybe beer with myself and you councillors. So just know that. The reason that he and I had a discussion is I was intrigued with his economic recovery task force. So I will ask that the CAO discuss with the corporate officer to contact the Kamloops corporate officer, if you would please, and the procedure or process and protocol that they used is something I would like us to consider at our place. So rather than get into the multitude of details, if we could take that route, then it's something that I feel we all have to participate, myself and individual councillors, staff, key staff, and key members of the local community that can contribute too. So I really like the way that he's done it, and I'd like to see if we can emulate that. And once our corporate officer has that protocol, we'll take it from there. The other thing of note is if you monitored Pemberton's financial plan, as they reduced their initial 5% tax increase to 0. So they are going through the same mechanizations that we have done, and just part of the discussion that we had in the past, if we are able to get through this year without having to borrow, that will be a big win. So obviously we've got to protect our cash flow every which way but loose, and we appreciate council's support as well as staff's diligence. That's it for me, and we'll go to the CAO for the CAO report.
CAO, you're live.
Okay, thank you. Got a few things today. First of all, most importantly, I want to announce that our new Director of Public Works and Utilities has started work here at the district. His name is Rory Card. He comes from Northern Alberta. I think this is the most mountains he's ever seen, and he loves it. He's got a wealth of municipal experience in public works, utilities, project management, and emergency preparedness. He's also had to step in as a Director of Public Works when he was not, and even as acting CAO when the CAO there left. So he's no stranger to taking on some big challenges, and he's already been very, very busy here working long days and dealing with a number of issues, which I'm sure you're seeing on our Facebook page. But yeah, going very well. I'll talk about the work in progress report. There's one thing we didn't get in time. We did get another award from a grant for the Biosolids Handling Options Project. That's a $10,000 grant. So that was successful. There are a number of other grants that are being submitted right now, and we're hoping to hear back from them in May. So I'll bring reports on those in June or email sooner. Something that's not a grant, but I think everyone would be interested to know, especially out in the community, is that Vivian Birch-Jones, our Area B Director for SLRD, has been working with the district and has managed to get $264,000 out of the SLRD towards upgrades to the rec center, including conversion of all the lighting to LED and installation of solar panels. That is 100% funding. So the requests for proposals are now being worked on and published to get that happening. All told, with all the grants that are happening around the rec center, some we can't even announce yet, but there's about $1.5 million that are going into the rec center this year at a total cost to the district of maybe $5,000, and that's just a contingency, which we may not spend. So some good news there financially. A reminder to everyone in the public that we are still accepting applications for volunteer members to the Water Advisory Committee. That application process is open until this Thursday, May 7th at 2 p.m. Please look on our website under news and announcements. The application form is there on the news and announcements part of the district's website. If you can't find it or just don't want to look for it, no problem, just call or email Municipal Hall. We will send you the application form. So once all applications are received, the selection committee of staff will look through qualifications and experience and history and provide a recommended list of members to council. Council will make the final decision as to who sits on that committee. And if there are not enough qualified people, we will just re-advertise. And finally, a question from one of our councillors. Thank you for asking. So just today, we did receive final confirmation regarding contractors coming into town. We didn't want to announce this prior because they weren't sure, and we didn't want to be announcing something that wasn't going to happen. So just today, we did receive 100% confirmation that a company by the name of Premier Building Solutions, who has been contracted to do the work on the old A&W, which is to be the new Tim Hortons. They'll be coming into town starting next week, and they'll be staying at the district's campground. Now, as most people are aware, RV parks and campgrounds have been closed by provincial order. However, there are some exceptions to it, including housing what are considered essential travelers, such as healthcare workers and construction contractors who are working in the local community. So they can't just be staying here and going somewhere else. So this company does meet the requirements of that exception, and they're confirming that they're following all the health and safety guidelines that they're required to follow under the provincial health officer's orders, and they will be monitored and checked in with by both the campground operator and district staff. We'll be meeting with them in person as they come into town and talking to them about what our expectations are of their behavior while they're here, and simple actions they can take to reduce the chances of them bringing something into town, such as if they need to go shopping for dinner, they send one person, or they engage with the volunteer response group to do the shopping for them. So we'll be looking at all those options to keep them safe and to keep the community safe as they come in, and try to think on the premise that as they come into town, they should consider themselves to be in a 14-day quarantine. Work on the job site, get back to the campsite, don't wander the streets if you don't have to, for at least a couple weeks. And then if new crew are coming in, it all starts again, right? We expect them to follow the highest standards of safety, but they are following the rules that are laid out by the province. They are considered an essential service. The campground is the best place for them to be. So the public can expect to see some trailers showing up in the campground this weekend. And then next Wednesday, May 13th, the first couple of crew show up, and it could grow to at least half a dozen crew in self-contained RVs. And there will be signage at the campground as well to remind other people who are coming through town who shouldn't be, that it's not a recreational campground right now. They're not welcome there. You have to be a construction worker or a healthcare worker to stay there. And that is my report for the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Any questions, comments from council? Okay, there being none, there is no new business. Item 18. Item 19, I need a resolution that the meeting be open to questions from the media and public. Who will so move?
Councillor Wiebe.
Second,
Councillor Hoffel.
and call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion carries.
Do we have questions from the media or the public?
No, Mr. Mayor, no questions have been submitted.
Okay, we'll move to item 20, adjournment. I need someone to move that the May 4th, 2020 regular council meeting be adjourned. Who will so move?
Councillor Hoffel.
Second,
Councillor Howe.
call the question. Those in favor? Opposed, if any?
Motion enthusiastically carried.
Thank you, staff. Thank you, council, for your patience. We're doing well. We'll get through this together. Good night, everyone.